Before we jump into today's story, drop a quick comment to say hi, tell me your name, where you're watching from, and let me know if you're sticking around till the end. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. Alright, let's get into the story. I never thought my life would come to this. 60 years of living, loving, sacrificing, reduced to the sting of a slap across my face. Not from a stranger, not from some drunk neighbor at a bar, but from the woman my son proudly married. In front of everyone. Friends, you enjoy listening to stories, but you don't subscribe to the channel or like the videos. I request you to please subscribe to the channel right now so that I get more motivation to bring you even more stories. If you help me reach 1,000 subscribers, I promise to bring you extremely best stories with a truly real feel, so go ahead, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and now let's move on to today's story. I can still feel the burn of her palm that day, the way my cheek sizzled, the silence that followed, and then the laughter. My humiliation was not private, it was performed like theater in a living room that smelled of lasagna and betrayal. What crushed me even more wasn't the slap itself. It was my son's words afterward. "You deserved it, Ma." Those 4 words. They were worse than the slap. My own flesh and blood siding with his wife in my degradation. I raised that boy. I scrubbed his knees when he fell, stayed up during his fevers, packed his lunches for school when I was too tired to stand. And now I was trashed to be discarded, shamed, silenced. But I made a silent promise to myself that day, they will regret this. To understand my vengeance, you must know who I am. My name is Margaret O'Connor, though most people in Bridgeport, Connecticut know me simply as Maggie. My late husband, Patrick, was a postal worker with a loud laugh and a gentle soul. He passed 10 years ago, leaving me with a paid-off house, a pension, and silence that wrapped itself around me in the evenings. I have one son, Michael. My miracle child. For years I thought I was barren, but at 36, after a rosary of tears and doctor visits, he came along. Maybe that's why I spoiled him. Maybe that's why he grew into a man who never truly learned gratitude. But every mother forgives her child. Or at least she wants to. Michael was bright, ambitious. He became an accountant, married a teacher named Emily 3 years ago, and together they moved 30 minutes away to Stamford. I tried to welcome Emily like a daughter. I truly did. I cooked for her, gifted her my pearls on their wedding day, even gave them money for the down payment of their house. But Emily always looked at me like I was a jar past its expiration date, useless and taking up space. It was a Sunday, early spring, when they invited me for dinner. Emily made lasagna with garlic bread, green salad, and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. They had some friends over, neighbors, even Michael's boss. The wine was flowing, laughter filled the room, and I laughed too, though some part of me knew I wasn't part of the show. At one point I made a joke, something harmless, a little poke at Emily's constant obsession with redecorating. I said, every time I visit, this house feels different. I can't keep track, maybe next time even Michael will be in a new corner. The room chuckled lightly. But Emily's eyes froze. Her hand came across my face before I even realized she had stood. The room went silent. My ear rang. My drink sloshed onto the table. And everyone looked at me as though I had done something obscene. I whispered, "What was that for?" And Michael, my baby, my only child, looked at me with annoyance and said, "You deserved it." I did not argue. I did not cry. Not there, not in front of all those witnesses. I held my cheek with one hand, lifted my chin, and forced myself not to collapse under the weight of shame and betrayal. I excused myself, walked out their front door, and drove back to my quiet little home in Bridgeport. But inside me, something broke. And in that breaking, something else was born. I realized I had been erased, dismissed, and disrespected. I realized I had given everything to these people and they had taken it all as entitlement, never gratitude. I realized that sometimes a woman has to teach a lesson. And so, my revenge began. When people talk about vengeance, they imagine rage, flames and shouting, confrontations and violence. My revenge did not look like that. It was quiet, cold, and calculated. Because if I had learned anything in my 60 years, it was patience. I spent the first 2 weeks after the slap in silence, replaying every word, every smirk, every dismissive look from Emily. Rage came and went, but strategy settled in. I remembered every secret Michael had told me over the years, every confession of debt, every foolish mistake. I remembered Emily's desire to climb socially, her obsession with appearances. And I knew that appearances can be destroyed. But I didn't want to merely hurt them. I wanted to make them feel what I felt, powerless. Forgotten. Humiliated. I started small. A phone call here, a casual coffee meeting there. Michael's boss had been at the dinner party. He saw the slap, though he pretended it didn't happen. I invited him for coffee one morning, confiding tenderly, like a worried mother, about Michael's new drinking habit. A lie? Perhaps. But believable, considering Michael had been sipping wine like water that night. I let just enough concern drip from my words to plant suspicion. Nothing more. Then I called my cousin Angela, who happened to serve on the PTA committee that Emily adored being part of. I made subtle comments about Emily's temper. Angela ate it up. Like drops of water on stone, I began eroding their image. It didn't take much effort, really. Whispers are stronger than shouts. A small sigh here, a well-placed word there, and before long, Michael and Emily's perfect little bubble began to thin. By the second month after that slap, I heard from a friend who also knew Emily socially. She told me Emily had been snappy during a PTA meeting, short-tempered, biting toward another mother who dared to question her latest fundraiser proposal. Of course, that kind of gossip spreads quickly in suburban circles. And who did they quietly blame for her temper? The woman who once slapped her mother-in-law in public. The incident had never truly vanished. People remembered, though most stayed polite about it. I knew it lingered like an odor in the room, subtle but undeniable. And Michael? My sweet boy who once couldn't step onto the school bus unless I kissed his forehead for luck? He was beginning to stumble at work. His boss, the same man who had seen that dinner party disgrace, was suddenly assigning him fewer high-profile clients. I didn't have to ask why. Seeds, once planted, sprout on their own. I waited, I watched, and I smiled in the privacy of my home. They didn't know it yet, but they were entering a storm. 3 months after the slap, Emily came to my door. Alone. She stood there, her hair tied back, sunglasses covering her eyes though the day was cloudy. For a long moment I considered not opening the door, letting her knock until her knuckles reddened. But then I thought better. A predator always lets the prey step closer. I opened the door slowly. Emily. Maggie, she said, forcing a tight smile. I wanted to talk. I stepped aside. She entered, her perfume filling my hallway. She glanced around at my living room, at the family photographs that lined the mantel, the old wedding photos, Michael's first grade picture, Patrick in his postal uniform holding up a bag of mail with a grin. Emily's eyes softened, then hardened again. I don't think we were fair to each other, she began. I said nothing, just gestured for her to sit. She pulled off her sunglasses. That's when I saw the bruise under her left eye, carefully masked with foundation but still blooming faintly along her cheekbone. For one moment, my heart lurched. Michael? My son? Could he have done this? Emily noticed my stare and turned her face slightly away. It's nothing. I walked into a cabinet door. A cheap excuse. The same lie women tell when they want to hide the truth. I folded my hands on my lap. Why are you really here, Emily? She hesitated, chewing her bottom lip. I think Michael's been under too much stress lately. Work, finances, just everything. He's been drinking more than usual. And maybe I haven't been supportive enough. But, you know your son. You know he can get difficult when he feels cornered. So. My little whispers had begun blooming into thunder. Have you considered counseling? I asked, a faint smile playing on my lips. She glanced at me cautiously. Maybe. But sometimes I don't know if he listens to anyone. Except you. The irony almost made me laugh. He used to listen to me, yes. Once upon a time. But not anymore, not since he told me I deserved humiliation. Since he allowed the woman before me to slap me like disobedient help. You want me to talk to him? I asked softly. She took a deep breath. I don't know. Maybe. I just thought you'd understand. I looked at her bruise one more time, then at the wedding ring glinting on her finger. And I realized something, my revenge didn't have to be just about punishing. It could also unravel their lives from within, thread by fragile thread. I did not promise her anything. I only offered tea, which she declined, and then walked her to the door. But that bruise stayed imprinted in my mind like a fresh brand. That night, I sat by my bedroom window and remembered a different slap. Patrick had never laid a hand on me during our marriage, never. But I remembered being 6 years old in Brooklyn, standing too close to my father when he had been drinking. His rough palm had caught me across the face so hard I'd fallen to the floor. My mother had rushed in, wept over me, pleaded with him, but by morning she had acted as though nothing had happened. He was her husband, after all. And I realized then how patterns echo. My father's hand, Emily's hand, both rewriting what I was worth. Only this time, I was not a child. And I refused to swallow silence. To destroy a man, you don't attack his strength, you attack his foundations. Michael's foundations were threefold: his work, his marriage, and his reputation. I had already started cracking the first two. Now came reputation. Bridgeport may be small compared to New York, but it thrives on gossip. Every church brunch, every coffee catch-up at a diner, every book club is a pulpit for rumor. I became the quiet saint, the mother who worried endlessly about her son and his difficult wife. My words dripped with sympathy, never accusation, but each carefully chosen phrase planted weeds. Oh, Michael's drinking has gotten worse, I don't know how Emily handles it. She's such a lovely girl, but she has such a temper, it must be hard for Michael. The pressure at his work is ruining him, I'm afraid they might even let him go. Notice how nothing I said was a concrete accusation. Only sighs. Concern. Poor them. But people love a scandal, especially when presented sweetly by a woman with watery eyes. By the end of summer, I knew the whispers had taken root. A friend called to tell me someone saw Michael arguing with his boss in the parking lot. Another said Emily stormed out of a PTA event in tears. Oh yes, my seeds had become weeds, choking their golden image. One evening in September, the phone rang. It was Michael. Ma, we have to talk. His voice was tight, strained, almost foreign. Of course, sweetheart. Do you want to come over? Silence. Then, no. We'll meet somewhere. Neutral. He suggested a diner halfway between our houses. When I arrived, he was already there, hunched over a cup of coffee, dark rings under his eyes. He looked older than his 33 years. "Ma, what are you saying to people?" he demanded as soon as I sat down. I blinked. "What do you mean? Don't play dumb with me. My boss has been giving me side eyes for weeks now, like he doesn't trust me. Emily says people at PTA are whispering about her. Someone even asked if I was drinking too much. Where the hell are they getting this from?" I stirred a packet of sugar into my coffee calmly. Maybe people are just noticing things themselves. His jaw tightened. "Cut it out, Ma. Whatever you're doing, stop." The audacity nearly made me laugh. Stop? After he stood by while his wife struck me, after he told me I deserved humiliation? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Michael. I've spent my whole life protecting you. But maybe now life is showing you what disrespect really costs." He froze, staring at me with dawning realization. His lips parted, then closed again. Finally, he muttered, "I can't believe you do this to me." And he walked out. But I could tell from the slump of his shoulders, he believed it. Weeks later, I discovered through a neighbor that Michael and Emily had started seeing a marriage counselor. Apparently Emily had threatened to leave him if things didn't improve. I pictured him sitting in some sterile office, wringing his hands, trying to explain why his work was faltering, why his wife pulled away when he reached for her. But here's the thing, he never once reached out to me again. No phone call. No apology. Nothing but thickening silence. That silence built a wall between us, a wall I had no intention of breaking down. If anything, it was my throne. I sat atop it, watching them with cold satisfaction. Still, deep down, a question festered. Could I really break my own son? Could revenge against Emily justify crushing the boy I once kissed goodnight every evening? The answer came soon enough, in a way I did not expect. One gray November afternoon, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a photo, Emily with another man. Not Michael. They were at a restaurant, leaning close, her hand brushing his arm. And suddenly, I understood. Fate itself had joined my little game. I placed the photo back in the envelope, smiled for the first time that day, and whispered to myself. This is only the beginning. I must have stared at that photo for an hour, my hands trembling though my heart was steady. Emily. My daughter-in-law, that golden girl who looked down on me as though I were dirt under her manicured nails, leaning in close to a man who wasn't her husband. The world is full of affairs, of course. Temptation is common, vows fragile. But for me, this wasn't about moral judgment, it was opportunity. Cold, gleaming opportunity. I didn't know who had sent the photograph. Perhaps someone else wanted to hurt Michael, perhaps just a jilted friend of Emily's. But I didn't care. What mattered was that I now held, quite literally, the sharpest blade possible, proof that Emily was not the saint she pretended to be. Revenge, I realized, had now graduated from whispers to weapons. I did not immediately run to Michael with the photo. That would have been foolish. My son was stubborn, even if I had proof, he might cling to Emily out of pride. A man who tells his mother she deserved humiliation is not going to admit easily that he married a traitor. No, I had to let the truth erode him slowly, the way seawater eats at cliffs. Then, when he was ready, I would drop the stone that split everything apart. First, I asked around. Quietly. I went to church luncheons, visited the old hair salon Emily used, even struck up conversations at the supermarket with women who knew her through book clubs. With just a bit of gentle steering, an innocent question here, an offhand remark there, I discovered her friend was a fellow teacher at her school, James Halpern. Younger than her, not married, charming in the way insecure women lap up. It was almost too easy. One Saturday evening, I asked Michael to come by for dinner. He reluctantly agreed. When he arrived, his face looked worn, his shoulders heavy. Over roast chicken and mashed potatoes, I spoke softly. "You seem tired, sweetheart." He sighed. "Things at work are a mess. She's been distant lately. Nothing feels right." I tilted my head, feigning concern. "Distant how?" He rubbed his temples. She's out more. Says she's busy with school. Comes home late. Barely talks." I let a pause hang in the air. Then, gently, "Michael, you don't think?" I stopped. As though the thought was too horrible to complete. He snapped his gaze to me. "Don't. I just worry, that's all," I murmured. "People change when stress builds. Sometimes, they seek comfort elsewhere." His fork clattered against the plate. "Stop it, Ma." I lowered my eyes, as though chastised. "Of course. Forget I said anything." But the seed had been dropped. I saw it in the way his face tightened, in the gloom that entered his eyes. A week later, fortune favored me again. I happened to be driving through Stamford when I noticed Emily walking into a coffee shop. She wasn't alone. James, the same man from the photograph, was with her. They sat close, laughing, her hand grazing his arm again and again. It was almost comical how reckless she was. As though the universe itself wanted me to succeed. I parked my car 2 blocks away and walked past their window deliberately, ensuring Emily caught a glimpse of me as she leaned forward across the table with a too intimate smile. Her face paled instantly, though she tried to cover it with a laugh. I didn't stop. I didn't confront her. I let her stew in her own fear. Later, she would try to insist it was just a colleague, but she would know, I had seen too much. Guilt is a leash stronger than chains. A month later, they invited me again for dinner. I accepted, lips pressed tight with patience. I knew exactly what I was going to do, with subtlety so fine it would sting worse than the slap. Dinner ran smoothly at first. Emily wore a red dress, makeup thick as paint to cover whatever anxieties brewed beneath. Michael drank 2 glasses of wine too quickly, though I noticed his eyes hardly met hers. When dessert came, Emily's carefully arranged tiramisu, I set down my fork and sighed softly. "You know, Michael, I saw Emily the other day. At a cafe. She was with a colleague, I believe. James, was it?" The fork froze halfway to Michael's mouth. Emily went stiff. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "We were discussing lesson plans." I smiled gently. "Oh, of course, darling. But it did look so friendly. I suppose I only mention it because I don't want people to misunderstand. You know how this town loves to gossip." Michael's face clouded. He drank again. Silence thickened around the table. I excused myself not long after, kissed Michael on the cheek, and left Emily trembling behind me. The trap was closing, one careful coil at a time. 2 nights later, my phone rang at midnight. It was Michael. His voice was hoarse, jagged. "She's cheating on me, Ma." I remained quiet, letting his pain spill out. He told me about finding texts on her phone, late-night messages to James, playful words she had never used with him in years. "She's been lying to me this whole time," he whispered. "After everything I've given her. After turning on you for her." And there it was. The confession I had longed for, not just his realization of her betrayal, but his acknowledgement of the betrayal he had made against me. I wanted to say, "I told you so." I wanted to scream it. But I merely whispered, "Oh, Michael. I'm so sorry." In the weeks that followed, everything unraveled. Emily denied, shouted, threw accusations back at him. Michael drank more heavily than ever. They went to counseling again, but this time the cracks were too deep. Their arguments spilled into public, a blow-up at a grocery store aisle, another at a holiday party with friends. And through it all, I stayed poised, gentle, supportive. To outsiders, I was the grieving mother, horrified by her son's marital discord, desperate to help, but secretly? I reveled in it. Every scream they unleashed at each other, every glare, every slammed door was music to me. She slapped me once, in front of everyone. And now? Now everyone could clearly see her shame, her failure. I could have stopped there. I could have let their marriage dissolve naturally under the weight of mistrust. But no, this was not enough. She needed to feel the same humiliation I had felt. So I arranged one more play. At the annual church charity auction, a well-attended event pulling half of Bridgeport into its velvet-draped hall, I discreetly handed an envelope to the event's organizer, a woman always hungry for gossip. "If it helps stir donations," I whispered. "People pay more when the evening is exciting." Inside that envelope, the photograph. Emily and James, too close at that restaurant table. By the next day, whispers were wildfire. Emily O'Connor and the schoolteacher. Michael's poor mother. How shameless. Her face must have burned every time she entered the grocery store, every time she set foot into church, every time she faced another parent at school. I had been slapped before an audience. Now she was the one slapped by society's tongue. By early spring, Michael filed for divorce. He came to me, gaunt, eyes ringed with sleepless nights. I cooked for him, comforted him, never once gloating aloud. But in my heart, I knew justice had been carved. Emily moved out, her reputation shredded. Michael limped through work, humbled, hollowed, no longer the arrogant boy who once told me I deserved humiliation. He had learned the lesson life, and his mother, taught him the hard way. And me? I sat in my quiet Bridgeport house, sipping tea, staring at the family photo on my mantel. Patrick used to say revenge was poison that kills the drinker. Perhaps he was right. But sometimes poison tastes like honey. When the papers were signed, and the whispers about Emily reached their crescendo before fading to regular gossip, I thought satisfaction would fill me completely. I believed revenge was a destination, a finish line with a golden cup waiting at the end. But victory has a strange taste. Sweet at first, cloying after a while, then oddly bitter when it lingers too long on the tongue. I sat alone more often now. My table, once lively with Michael's laughter and Emily's polite chatter, stood in stubborn quiet. I had won. I had watched their marriage collapse, I had seen Emily scorned by neighbors, and even my son acknowledged what side he had chosen against me. So why did my house feel colder? Why did my tea taste metallic? Michael came by 2 or 3 times a week after the divorce. He would shuffle in, drop onto the couch, and bury his face in his hands. "She destroyed me, Ma," he murmured one night, whiskey thick on his breath. "She took everything. My reputation, my stability, she was supposed to be my partner, and she laughed behind my back." I touched his hair softly, like I used to when he was small. But the truth was, what destroyed him wasn't just Emily's betrayal. It was my orchestration. The whispers, the photo, the nudges into suspicion, I had twisted every knife deeper until his marriage bled out entirely. Yet he didn't know. To him, I was the patient mother, the steady hand offering tissues and warm food. The irony nearly suffocated me some nights. One evening, he looked at me sharply. "You were right all along, weren't you? You always saw through her." And in that moment, my chest swelled with triumph, then hollowed quickly. Because his eyes, though admiring, were also fractured. I had cracked him, my own son. While Emily bore the brunt of humiliation, not everyone remained blind to how events unfolded. At the grocery store, I overheard two women muttering. "They say Maggie stirred it all up." "Oh, come on, she's just a sweet old lady." "Sweet? Please. Don't you remember how fast those rumors spread? Nothing travels that quick unless someone's pushing." I smiled faintly as I passed them, but my stomach twisted with unease. The art of whispering only works when you are invisible in the act. If too many started seeing me as the source, my power would lose its edge. Still, I reminded myself, they didn't matter. I had achieved what I wanted. Emily's handprint no longer burned on my cheek, the slap was overwritten by every sneer she received from society. Justice delivered. Or so I told myself. I often found myself speaking to Patrick at night. His picture on the dresser, his smile almost mocking me. "You'd laugh if you saw me, Patrick," I whispered into the silence. Me, the dutiful church-going wife, turning into a spider in her web. In my dreams, Patrick sometimes appeared, never cruel, never disapproving, but always distant. "Is this what you wanted, Maggie?" his eyes seemed to ask. And I would wake with my fists clutching the sheets, uncertain if I wanted the answer. One afternoon in early summer, months after the divorce, Emily showed up at my house again. Her appearance startled me, not that she came, but how she looked. Gone was the sharp-dressed schoolteacher with perfect hair and cool poise. Instead, a thinner, tired woman stood on my porch, eyes hollow, clothes wrinkled, a shadow of arrogance still clinging to her as though it were all she had left. I hesitated before opening the door. Then I let her in. "What do you want, Emily?" I asked, voice stiff, hand resting on the back of a chair like I could shove it between us if needed. She smirked bitterly. "Congratulations. You got what you wanted. Michael hates me, the town hates me. You always hated me anyway, don't bother denying it." I gave a non-committal shrug. "I only ever wanted respect." Her eyes flashed. "Respect? You call what you did respect? Don't think I don't know you were behind half those rumors. A clever little martyr act, oh, poor mother, so wronged by her wicked daughter-in-law. And people love to believe the old widow. Well played." Her words stabbed because they were true. But I didn't flinch. "I didn't make you cheat, Emily," I said quietly. "I didn't make you slap me in front of others." She laughed, a broken, ugly sound. "And I didn't make your son drink himself bloody every night. But we both know who set him off balance, who twisted the knife." For the first time in months, I felt naked, exposed. She wasn't wrong. But I refused to admit it aloud. "It's over, Emily. You should leave." She took a breath, stared at me with something between fury and pity, then spat, "You'll die alone, Maggie. And when you do, no one will remember your little victory. Only that you tore down your own family." Then she walked out, leaving her words like shards scattered across my floor. For days, I couldn't shake her face, her accusation. I had convinced myself I was teaching them a lesson, reclaiming dignity. But Emily's bitter prophecy clung to me, "You'll die alone." At church the following week, when neighbors smiled at me politely, I caught a flash of distance in their eyes. Were they thinking it too? That I had gone too far? That Maggie O'Connor, once the sweet widow, had transformed into something darker? I gripped my rosary tighter, whispering prayers that felt hollow even as I said them. Michael was unraveling faster than I expected. He missed work so often I feared he might lose his job. His drinking wasn't just rumor anymore, it was reality. Empty bottles littered his car when I visited, his skin looked yellowish from late nights and cheap liquor. "Son," I said once, trying to take the glass from his hand. "You need help." He pulled the glass back violently, glaring at me. "Don't tell me what I need. Don't you dare." I froze. His anger wasn't at Emily this time. It was at me. For a fleeting instant, suspicion clouded his eyes, as though some part of him, deep down, knew I had played more than just a supportive role in his ruin. He didn't say it outright. But silence can accuse louder than words. One evening, as the autumn winds returned, I sat alone again by my window. The streetlight bathed the pavement in pale yellow, and fallen leaves skittered across the road like restless spirits. I had everything I wanted. Emily crushed. Michael humbled. My honor avenged. So why did the night air feel heavier, pressing into my lungs, whispering? Why did I feel the faintest prickle of dread, like the story wasn't finished, like revenge had only set the stage for a new trial I hadn't foreseen? I clutched my teacup, tasting bitterness on my tongue, and realized, revenge doesn't end neatly. It opens doors you can't easily close. And I had no idea what might walk through next. I thought revenge would quiet the noise inside me. Instead, it only made the echoes louder. Every night when I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face twisting with hatred, Michael's eyes dull with alcohol, Patrick's silent gaze from his photograph. And me, I sat like a queen on ashes. My crown was made of whispers, my throne was hollow victories. Perhaps Emily was right. Perhaps the world would only remember how I destroyed my own family. But by now, the wheel had been set spinning. And once it turns, it drags everything with it. Months passed, and the town's anger softened into indifference. Emily was no longer a daily scandal, just a cautionary tale. The teacher who ruined her marriage. Parents whispered about whether they wanted her near their children. Her career started crumbling under unspoken judgment. I sometimes spotted her in town, looking paler, thinner, walking quickly with her head low. She didn't see me, or maybe she pretended not to. And a strange pang stirred in me, not pity, exactly, but a recognition. She bore the same public shame I once carried on my cheek after her slap. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I tasted something unfamiliar, something dangerously close to regret. Michael was worse. Much worse. His boss finally suspended him after he showed up late too many times, reeking of bourbon. I drove him home once after he passed out in his car on Main Street. The shame of lifting my grown son's limp body, the same arms I once carried as a baby, nearly shattered me. At home, he raged one moment and wept the next. She ruined everything, he'd shout, hurling a bottle against the wall. Then later, in softer tones, he confessed, maybe I pushed her away. Maybe I wasn't enough. And in those moments, I couldn't tell anymore if revenge had punished Emily or merely destroyed Michael. One night, he staggered into my house and collapsed onto the couch, muttering, "You're all I have left, Ma. Don't ever leave me. Please." I stroked his hair as sobs racked him, but inside my chest there was only hollowness. What had I created? Not long after, our church pastor, Father Donnelly, stopped by. A kind man in his 70s, he'd known Patrick well. He sat across from me with his hands folded and eyes soft. "Maggie," he said, sipping the tea I offered, "people are worried about your boy. He's adrift. Angry, lost. Some think he might hurt himself." My breath hitched. "Has he said anything?" the pastor asked gently. I shook my head. Father Donnelly leaned in closer. "I don't mean to pry, Maggie. But some also whisper. They say you took a hard hand in stirring his troubles with Emily. Is that true?" His eyes weren't accusing, just searching. Which made me feel smaller. "I only wanted respect," I whispered, the words splintering in my throat. The pastor sighed. "I understand. But revenge, it makes us believe we're mending wounds when all we do is deepen them. You still have time to choose differently." When he left, I collapsed in tears for the first time since that slap. The breaking point came on a January night, heavy with snow. Michael called me at 2 a.m., slurring his words. "Ma. I can't." The line went dead. I drove through icy streets, heart pounding, and found him in his driveway, half frozen, bottle still clenched in his fist. His lips were blue, his body collapsed against the car. Panic tore through me as I dragged him inside, called the ambulance, pressed blankets against him. At the hospital, the doctor told me he'd survive, but his liver was in jeopardy. "Another episode like this," the doctor said sternly, "and he may not have much time." I sat by his bed that night, listening to the machines beep steadily, each sound carving into my soul. My revenge had crushed Emily, yes. But it had also nearly killed my son. A week later, while Michael still lay in the hospital recovering, Emily appeared. She stood awkwardly at the door of his room, clutching a bouquet of cheap flowers. When she saw me, her jaw tightened. "I heard," she said flatly. I had to see for myself. My instinct was to spit venom, to tell her she had no right. But Michael stirred at her voice, opening his tired eyes with something like longing. For the first time, I understood, no matter what had happened, part of him still loved her. And that was the wound even I couldn't erase. "Emily," he rasped weakly, "I'm sorry." She bit her lip, tears welling. "So am I." I turned away, unable to watch. Revenge had not destroyed their connection. It had only poisoned it, and me along with it. That night I returned home to my cold, quiet house. I poured myself tea but let it grow cold. For weeks I had told myself I was justified, that Emily's slap demanded balance, that Michael's siding with her required punishment. But now, guilt had dug roots in the soil of my heart. What if the price of my vengeance was not their relationship, but my son's very life? I sat staring at Patrick's photo, whispering, "Did I go too far, love? Did I?" The silence gave no answers. Michael eventually left the hospital, weaker but sober, at least for a while. I hovered over him like a sentinel, afraid one wrong turn would send him spiraling again. One afternoon, with winter sunlight spilling through his living room, he turned to me suddenly. "Ma, did you start those rumors?" My chest seized. My throat dried. He held my gaze, sharper this time, sober. "Tell me the truth. Did you?" For a long moment, the world stilled. I could lie. Keep the mask polished. Or I could admit the monster I had become. But before I could answer, he looked away. "Forget it. Doesn't matter. We're here now." Yet the way his shoulders slumped told me it did matter. He didn't need my confession, he already knew. I thought I could control the game. I thought revenge was like a chessboard, every piece moving as I willed. But life is no game. People bleed, people break, people cry out in ways you cannot silence. I had destroyed Emily, yes. But my son was collateral damage, and perhaps one day he would never forgive me. That night, as snow fell heavy outside my window again, I admitted for the first time, revenge had given me power, but it had stolen my peace. And I was no longer sure if the trade was worth it. But it was too late to turn back. By the time spring came again, my son was a shadow of who he once had been. He had gained no job back, his skin thinner, his eyes ringed with bruised exhaustion. He attended AA meetings half-heartedly, sometimes sober for a week, sometimes tumbling back into drink after a night of silence. Every mother hopes her child grows stronger with age. Mine withered, and no amount of soup or prayers could reverse it. And in the pit of me, I knew, it wasn't just Emily. It wasn't just the bottle. It was me. Revenge is supposed to feel righteous. But the righteousness had evaporated, replaced by sour guilt hanging over my bed like smoke. And the cruelest part? I could not admit it to him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. In May, Michael's boss, once our family friend, invited him to a company banquet. Maybe it'll help him mend bridges, I told myself as I handed him the invitation. He glared at it like it was a summons to the gallows. I don't want to go. You need to, I urged. People forget if you remind them you're still standing. He finally agreed. And it was at that banquet that everything reached boiling point. Michael dressed in his only decent suit, body thinner than the fabric deserved. I ironed his shirt for him, kissed his cheek, and watched him leave with tired steps. I didn't attend. But later, I heard the whispers from 3 different mouths. He'd snapped at a colleague in public. Drank too much, had to be helped to his car. Even muttered something about my mother warned me loud enough to set comments swirling again. By morning, when he appeared on my doorstep, I could smell defeat before he opened his mouth. They're letting me go, Ma. His voice cracked. The boss didn't even hide it. Says I'm a liability. I'm finished. I wrapped my arms around him as he cried into my shoulder, and the dagger I had forged with my own whispers turned inside me. It was strange, then, to learn that Emily had been there that night too. Someone told me she came, not as Michael's wife, but as a guest with another colleague. Apparently, she'd watched from across the room as Michael stumbled. When I imagined her eyes on him, eyes that once had adored him, I felt a pang I couldn't name. Was it fury? Shame? Or the bitter recognition that no amount of venom had truly cut her from his heart? Because even in his ruin, he still whispered her name sometimes in sleep. One evening, Michael returned drunk again. He stormed into my house, his hair damp from rain, eyes wild. You did this, Ma, he snarled. The air froze between us. All those whispers, the gossip, you think I don't know? You think I don't see how this lined up perfectly? Emily might have cheated, but you poisoned everything before that. You made damn sure nothing survived. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. Why? He demanded. Why couldn't you just leave it alone? And there it was, the question I had asked myself in the darkest corners of the night. I wanted respect, I said hoarsely. After that slap, after your words. Respect? He laughed bitterly, stumbling against the wall. You wanted payback, Ma. And you got it. You won. But what's left? Look at me, look at your only son. You avenged yourself so well you destroyed me too. His tears rushed before I could stop mine. I reached for him, but he shoved me back with a trembling hand. I can't look at you without seeing it. I can't even. I just can't. Then he stormed out, and I didn't see him for a week. The call came late on a Friday night. Michael had been found unconscious, car wrecked against a pole. Alcohol again. The paramedics said he had been barely breathing when they pulled him out. At the hospital, the doctor met my eyes with solemn pity. He's alive, Mrs. O'Connor. But there's been severe damage to his liver. By medical probability, he doesn't have more than a year unless he changes drastically. A year. 60 years of my life had gone into raising him, 40 for protecting him, and all I had left was a clock ticking toward oblivion. I sank into the waiting chair, sobbing, my revenge now ash dripping from my palms. Emily came to the hospital, too. She stood at the door quietly, not daring to enter at first, as if the guilt of her own actions still weighted her down. But when Michael stirred awake, his lips formed her name before mine. And so she came in, sat by his bed, touched his hand. For hours, I watched silently. The two of them, enemies and lovers, broken and bound all at once. Her tears fell onto his sheets, and though I hated her, I hated more the truth that she gave him a hope I no longer could. I slipped out of the room quietly, my chest caving with a grief I had not expected. I had won the war, but lost my place at Michael's side in the process. That night, unable to carry the weight further, I returned to the church. Father Donnelly waited in the empty hall, soft light from the candles flickering against old wood. I did it, I said. I ruined them. Every whisper, every rumor, it was me. And now my son is dying because I couldn't stop. He listened silently, hands clasped, his face tender but heavy. Sin feeds on pride, Maggie, he said finally. But confession is not the end, it is only the beginning. Can you undo what you've done? No, I wept. Not now. Then your redemption is not in undoing. It is in carrying. In caring for the very person you helped to wound. Even if he never forgives you. I left the church hollow but with one truth clinging in my bones, my vengeance had reached its end. And now, what remained was redemption, or damnation. As spring turned to summer again, I sat by Michael's bedside more often than at my own table. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he only stared at the wall. When he slept, I held his hand, whispering apologies too quiet to wake him, but loud enough I prayed they reached him somehow. Emily returned more often than I wished, but I allowed it. If she gave him strength, I could not stop it, not anymore. What lesson had I taught in the end? That a slap could justify shattering a life? That respect earned through fear leaves only ruins? Revenge is circular, I realized. In trying to punish Emily, I had punished Michael. In trying to show I mattered, I had proven instead how much damage I could do. And one morning, as sunlight cut through the blinds and I listened to my son's shallow breathing, a thought iced my blood. Perhaps Emily had been right. Perhaps I would die alone. And perhaps I deserved it. The days that followed were long and heavy, like air before a thunderstorm. Michael was weaker now. His skin took on a yellow tinge, his eyes sunken. He spoke in shorter sentences, tiring easily. I cooked his meals. I drove him to doctor's appointments. I sat silently through Emily's visits, though something in me still twisted each time her perfume lingered in the room. Yet despite everything, despite her cruelty toward me, despite the slap, despite her betrayal, I found I could no longer hate her the same way. Her presence, unwanted though it was, gave Michael fleeting smiles, short-lived laughter. And I realized then, revenge had not destroyed her. It had destroyed me. One night, I pulled out the old stationery set Patrick had given me years ago. I wrote him a letter, a foolish thing, perhaps, but I needed to put words where silence choked me. My love, I began, I thought I was fighting to preserve dignity. But all I preserved was bitterness. Our boy is slipping, and though I wanted to blame Emily, I know my hands are soaked in the fault. I sharpened the knives that cut him. I fed the flames that burned this house to ash. Forgive me, if only you can. Forgive me, because I don't know if he ever will. When I finished, I folded the paper and tucked it into the family Bible. Maybe one day Michael would find it, when I was gone. Maybe then he would understand. Weeks later, Emily asked me to meet her. We sat in a cafe, the very same where I had once seen her too close to James. How strange life's circles are. She looked older, more worn, like grief had carved its own rivers into her face. I want to help Michael, she said simply. I folded my arms. Why now? Because I still care about him, she whispered. Because whatever happened before, whatever either of us did, none of it matters compared to the fact he's dying. Her words were sharp, but her eyes were wet. And though my pride raged against her, I could not deny she spoke truth. Then help him, I said coldly. But do not pretend we will ever be friends. She nodded, as though she had expected nothing else. One evening, as cicadas screamed outside his bedroom window, Michael turned to me. His voice was fragile, like twine snapping. Ma. I know. My heart pounded. Know what? That it was you. The rumors. The whispers. The photo, you might not have taken it, but you wielded it. I don't know all the details. But I'm not stupid. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. Michael. He held up his hand weakly. I don't even hate you for it. Not anymore. I wish you had trusted me to figure things out myself. You tried to protect your dignity, but you shattered mine in the process. His words splintered my heart. But he didn't scream. He didn't curse me. He simply looked away, exhausted, and whispered, I still love you, Ma. But that love feels broken. I cried harder than I had since the day Patrick died. From that day on, I made a vow, not of vengeance, but of care. I cared for my son with whatever time we had left. I drove him to meetings, I sat through his silence, I endured Emily's visits without protest. I prayed for him in the quiet evenings, begged heaven for mercy not only for his body but for the scars I had chiseled on his soul. It wasn't redemption, not fully. It was only service, a way to stitch tiny threads into fabric already torn. But it was what I could give. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Michael softened. His anger cooled into a tired acceptance. He even laughed one afternoon when I burned the chicken, teasing me like he had as a boy. That laugh, faint though it was, felt like salvation. By autumn, his health had worsened beyond hiding. The doctors spoke in cautious tones, but I could read between the lines, we had months, maybe weeks left. One evening, as golden leaves swirled outside the window, Emily and I sat together at his bedside. He dozed, chest rising and falling shallowly. You and I, Emily whispered, we destroyed each other. I nodded, tears slipping down my cheek. And him most of all. She didn't argue. For the first time, our silence was not hostile, but united in shared grief. On a quiet November morning, the end came. I held his hand as he drifted, his face gaunt but peaceful. Emily sat across from me, tears streaking down her face, both of us clinging to him as though our grip could anchor him to the world. His eyes flickered open one final time. He looked at me and whispered, Ma. I'm here, sweetheart. Don't be alone. Promise me. I nodded, though my breath shuddered. I promise. Then his gaze fluttered toward Emily, softer. Take care, of each other. And with one last breath, he was gone. The funeral was small but kind. Neighbors came, whispered condolences, shook my hand. But sympathy, I found, is as fleeting as gossip. They returned to their lives quickly, leaving me in my empty house once more. Emily and I spoke little afterward. She attended the burial, brought flowers for weeks, but eventually, she too drifted from my orbit, perhaps unwilling to relive the ruins of what we had made. And me? I live quietly now. The slap that once burned so fiercely feels like a memory from another life. All the whispers and rumors, all the schemes, they delivered nothing but silence. I sometimes open the Bible where my letter to Patrick waits, folded between Psalms and Proverbs. I read it, trace the ink with trembling fingers, and wonder if he sees me from somewhere beyond. Revenge had promised justice. It delivered emptiness. I sit by the window each evening, Bridgeport's streets quiet, leaves swirling in November winds. Do I regret it? Yes. And no. The wound of that slap had demanded an answer. But vengeance is like fire, you feed it thinking it will warm you, but in truth, it burns down the whole house. I avenged myself upon Emily. But in doing so, I lost Michael, the very heart I had sworn to protect. And so here I remain, a woman both victor and victim, surrounded by ashes, waiting one day to join Patrick again and answer for the choices I made. Because revenge never ends with the one you strike. It ends with you. Always.